I'm Douglas Holwerda, American psychotherapist working at family medical practice. They recently invited me to participate in a live stream, and I've found myself excited and interested in this idea. I've been a public speaker to different size audiences, and I've led discussion groups. So I'm also looking forward to what it's like to be online. I chose that topic is because so many of the clients that I see have problems, the origins of which come from childhood. And it seems to me, whether it's for parents or for adults, this question of what children need is very relevant and can be very helpful. We're not like turtles who hatch from an egg and go about life without the need for being raised. Human beings have a long period where they're influenced by adults, particularly parents, and those influences have a long-term impact on their life and whether they're thriving and living to their fullest or whether they're struggling with limitations that come from the messages that they took in. So please join me on May 11. I'll speak for about 30 minutes, after which there'll be opportunities for questions. My hope is that you will join me on the 30th and that you will find my talk relevant and helpful, and that it will generate some questions for you as well. Thank you. I'll see you then. Hello everyone, I'm Douglas Holwerda, a psychotherapist at Family Medical Practice in Hanoi. I've been here for 8 years, meeting with people who come in to talk to me about the problems they're dealing with. And I've been asked to do a live stream for all of you on the topic of what children need. And actually it's very appropriate because this month is Mental Health Awareness Month. And so part of what I'm going to talk about today is not only what it is that children need, but what it is we all need and how it is that when our needs aren't met, it affects us in our adult life. So let's start with a quote from Carl Jung. He said, "From a plant, a seed grows into an oak tree. Human beings also become what we are meant to be, except we get stuck." And this is the business of psychotherapy. This is the business of understanding how it is that we can become our full potential. And a lot of the ways that we get stuck have to do with the conditions that shape our early life, our childhood, the things that affect whether we become confident and strong and able to face the challenges of life, or whether we find ourselves insecure or telling ourselves that we're not good enough, or in one way or another affecting our ability to reach our higher potentials. So the good news is that if we don't get our needs met during childhood, that then becomes our adult task. We're never too old to learn to do for ourselves what we need to have done. Our needs never stop developing. We always have the opportunity to find the ways to meet our needs. So before I talk about the 5 needs, I'd like to also say that I'm talking about things that are what we would call ideals. In other words, when we aim for ideals or standards or goals or the highest expectations we can create for ourselves, it gives us a path to follow. We can look towards those things and we can try to aspire to doing those things. But sometimes we create a problem. which is that when we expect ourselves to be our ideal self, we end up feeling like a failure, feeling like we're not as good as we should be. And so I want to caution us before we even talk about these things to realize that in real life, we're never going to be perfect. We're never going to meet all of these ideals in a full 100% way. And it's not a matter of feeling bad about that. It's a matter of continuing to refocus ourselves on the things that we can see is our better self, our ideal self. So, one of the reasons I'm talking about what children need is because a lot of the therapy I do is with people who are in their 20s or 30s who are dealing with issues that have to do with the fact that their needs didn't get met in a full way, didn't get met in a way that helps them to be free to be themselves in a full way, to feel confident, to feel empowered, to be able to speak their own truth from their own personality, their own sense of who they are in life. They either are disempowered, feeling like I'm not good enough, or maybe they've compensated and they're acting bigger and more important than they really are, which is a way that people learn to protect their own insecurities or their low self-esteem. What we're after is the right and the permission to be our full and true self. Just like an oak tree is a full example of what comes from that seed, to be our full true self is an example of what it means to be fully human. And when we get stuck, a lot of times we get stuck pretty early in life because we start to develop ideas about ourselves that don't give us permission to be fully ourselves. I mean, when you think about it, a young child, let's just say until about the age of 6, is really their true self. They're not trying to adapt to the expectations of the world around them. They're simply acting in a way that's consistent with their own feelings. A baby cries or screams or does all kinds of things because it's just being who it is. And it's only later in life, usually in our late, like 10 or 12 years old, that we start to become adapting to the expectations of our peer groups, to the expectations of our teachers and our parents, and we start to compromise the parts of ourselves that are more authentic. I mean, it's a necessary thing to do, to adapt to the world around us, but sometimes we do that in such a way that we lose our authentic and true self. So let's start going down the list of things that the needs of children and ultimately the needs of all of us. So the first need that I'd like to talk about is the need for safety. It's a fundamental need that we all have because the opposite of feeling safe is to feel fearful. And when we're fearful, what we're doing is creating a kind of vigilance that has us looking outside ourselves as a way of protecting ourselves or being aware of what it is that might be dangerous. And when we're focused on the world around us, what happens is we neglect the world inside us. In other words, the safer we feel, the more comfortable we are to be ourselves, to play and act naturally, and to feel comfortable in the world that we're in. So, safety is one of the things that has the most impact on us when we're growing up. Of course, everyone recognizes that from the time we're born, we are completely dependent on our parents and the adults in our world to care for us. All we have is our ability to cry, to let people know what we need. And without the support of the adults around us, we wouldn't be able to survive or to thrive. And of course, we don't know what it is that represents the dangers in the world, so we need the eyes and ears and the caring of the adults in our world to keep us safe. And as we grow older, we start to gain our mobility, we start to be able to move around, we start to be able to be curious and discover the things that are in our world And without the adults to pay attention to what it is that we're getting into, we're taking risks. So safety is fundamental. Of course, as we get older, the responsibility for our safety becomes more and more our own. So we feel safe enough to be able to take risks, to climb things, to jump off from things, to go into the water, to do things that might be risky, but that give us some of the joys and pleasures of life. It's within the eyes and the protective guidance of adults that we first gain our sense of inner security that allows us then to be able to take the risks that are appropriate for us. Now, of course, one of the bad things that can happen to children is that they can find themselves in a world where it's not safe. And in fact, where some of the people whose jobs it is to keep us safe are the ones that actually are our greatest dangers. So when we are physically or emotionally abused by our parents or by the adults in our world, it can create very severe wounds because we don't know what it feels like to be safe. We start to become vigilant and wonder about who's safe and who we can trust. And a lot of times, because we're children and we don't have a way of comparing it to any other reality, those problems don't show up in our life until we get into our 20s. And we realize that we've become vigilant, that we're unaware of our inner life because we're paying so much attention to the world around us. Trust is a natural thing between human beings, and it's especially true when we've been brought up in an environment where we know that we are safe. Our inner security as an adult is directly connected to how safe we felt as a child. So if we think about how vulnerable children are and how much they need adults in their lives, it's very important to realize that the difference between having parents and adults who keep us safe and parents and adults who don't know how to keep us safe as a foundation to a life we have as an adult. The second need that I'd like to speak about today is what we would call the need to be seen. Let me explain about that, because obviously if I'm in front of you, you're seeing me, but actually maybe you're not. When I'm talking about the need to be seen, I'm talking about the need for our essence to be seen by the adults in our world. Our essence is not our behavior, it's not our appearance, it's not our performance or our behavior. It's something much deeper than that. It's something that's pure. It's our true self. And it's very important that adults tune in to the essence of their children, because their sense of value and worth comes directly from that connection. There's a famous psychologist named D.W. Winnicott who says that there's no message more important than to attend to a child, because it tells that child that they are worth being attended to. A child's sense of their own value and worth is directly connected to how much attention and how much observation the parents give them. And of course that's true when we're an infant and all we can do is cry or call out. But it's also true as we grow older. For us to be seen by our parents and by those who love us, not for the things we do or for the way we look or for our behaviors, but for something deeper than that. To see past our flaws and our mistakes to the person we are inside. If there's anything that affects our ability to reach our highest potential, it's the sense of self-worth. And it's a kind of a sad truth that most people come into adulthood and they feel a sense of low esteem, that there's something wrong with me. I'm not good enough. I'm not handsome enough. I'm not smart enough. There are so many negative ways in which we come to think about ourselves that have to do with our own value, our own worth. when in fact none of those things are related to our worth. Our worth is connected to our humanness and the fact that we're given this gift of life. So to be seen is in many ways to look past those things that represent our human frailties, our human weaknesses, the ways in which we aren't perfect in life, and to be loved despite all those imperfections, all those mistakes we make. This is what we need from the adults in our world, and this is what we give ourselves as we come into adulthood. The ability to be confident and strong and empowered, even while we realize that we're very human, full of flaws and faults, and yet worthy of love. So just like the opposite of safety creates fear and sometimes takes the form of abuse, the opposite of being seen is being neglected. And when a child grows up and doesn't have the attention or the connection that they would desire from their parents, that neglect can become an invisible challenge for them to have to face later. The way that it manifests in adulthood is a sense that their worth is diminished. A lot of times when somebody's neglected, they're working very hard to win approval or to gain validation from those around them. It shapes their social life because they feel like I'm not good enough and I have to prove myself to others. So these are some of the ways that not being seen or being neglected can become a problem as we get older. So now we're on to need number 3. And we're going to talk about that need as being developmentally appropriate tasks. In other words, it's a very natural thing for children to learn. And it's very important that adults in the child's world determine the things that are appropriate for them to learn, and to do it at a pace so that they can be successful. Curiosity is a natural thing, learning is a natural thing, and if we pace the tasks in the appropriate way, children don't lose their curiosity. They gain a sense of confidence and success, and they continue to grow and learn with confidence as they go. The mistake we sometimes make is we get ahead of the child and we start challenging them to things that they're not ready for. And that's when they start experiencing failure. They start thinking, oh, I can't do it, or I must not be smart enough. They start comparing themselves to other children or other people, and it starts to develop a sense of their own inadequacy. And it's not ever the child who is inadequate. It's always the fact that we may have overtasked them, asked them to do things they're not ready for. Of course, it can happen in the other direction too. If we're not putting things in front of children that give them a challenge or allow them to take the next step, they become bored or they become caught up in the repetition of doing the same thing, and they lose their curiosity and they no longer participate in the natural ways that children learn. So adults have the responsibility for creating developmentally appropriate tasks so that a child and eventually an adult can feel confident in the way that they're learning and approaching life. Schools are a big part of this. And when we group students together in groups of 20 or 30, what we're usually doing is we're aiming for the middle. We're saying, well, 9-year-olds should be able to learn this and this and this. Well, the truth is some of them will be much more able to learn that than others. And so we have to be careful as parents not to find our children in situations where they're being given tasks that represent expectations that aren't appropriate. So even while schools are the place where children go to learn, it's parents who are responsible for seeing to it that they're able to get the right kinds of tasks and the support they need to continue the learning process. I've worked with a lot of students who've been in high school And throughout the entire time they've been in school, they've gotten poor grades. They've been told that they are not smart enough or are not learning well enough for their age group. What happens by the time they're 15 or 16 is it's not a matter of whether they can learn it or not. It's that they've already come to believe that they can't learn it. It becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy. They see themselves as a poor student, and they don't even know what their actual potential is. They just follow what it is they believe to be true. And this is the responsibility of the adults. This is where the adults have failed in that case, to not understand how to place the appropriate developmental task in front of a child each step of the way. Well, the fourth need I'd like to talk about is the need for nurturance. What it is we're able to do for ourselves as an adult is directly connected to what was done for us as children. And if becoming our full and true self means to love and appreciate ourselves, it means that that is the experience we need to have as a child. Early on, when we're a child and we cry out for our needs, maybe we're hungry or we need some attention, the adult comes and soothes us, calms us down, lets us know that we're okay, rubs our back or holds us and rocks us. All of that is giving us the message that whatever it is we're afraid of, whatever it is that we're calling out for, will be met by the love and affection and the physical touch of an adult in our world. It's that affection and it's that soothing that tells us of our value and our worth. We all need this, not only when we're infants, but throughout our childhood. To be held, to be told that we're loved, to be reminded that we are important to each other or to one another, that as a child we are cared for by our parents and the adults in our world. When we know that that's true, when we know that we are loved, it allows us to then create a relationship to ourself that is loving, that approves of ourself, that doesn't wonder whether we're good enough, because we know that we're loved for who we are, not because we're good enough in a certain thing or that we look a certain way, but because we are who we are. Nurturance comes in many forms. Sometimes it's words, being told that we're loved. Sometimes it's in touch, being held, being soothed. Nurturance is a foundation for human connection. In order to connect with others and being able to offer love and affection, often it's very important that we have that first. So nurturance is a real key to the needs we have as children. The last need that I'm going to talk about today is the need that we all have to play. Isn't it amazing that when children have free time, they instantly begin to play? Their imagination kicks in. The way they move from one place to another involves spinning or jumping or skipping. It's such a natural thing for children to engage in life through a playful attitude. And it's also important that we bring that part of our childhood into our own adulthood. Of course, a lot of what we do when we're educating children is to think about the future, to think about what they need to learn so that they can get the right kinds of education and ultimately have a life where they have some control over their careers and the life they choose for themselves. But sometimes we sacrifice what it is that's actually very normal and natural during childhood, which is to allow for our imagination to be part of who we are. It's actually how we discover ourselves, spontaneously opening up to the things around us, turning one object into an imaginal object, playing with others without rules or without a plan in place, just discovering what's true in the world, in our immediate worlds. Play is a natural thing, and it's sad when we lose that ability to be in the present in that way. And I would say that adults often have given up on a part of themselves that's spontaneous, that's engaged directly with their bodies in the way that they move or the ways that they feel lighthearted. We become very future-oriented, and we are behaving on the roadmap of life, doing what we should do, instead of sometimes being in the present moment, acting in ways that might feel enjoyable or funny. So I want to encourage play, not only for children and having the time and the space for it, but also in adulthood. That part of being lighthearted and mentally healthy is to be able to discover that child within us that wants to play. So those are the 5 needs that I'm addressing today, and I hope that they resonate with you. I want to remind you that those are ideals, and none of us has a perfect childhood. None of us is perfectly safe. None of us is given developmental tasks in the perfect order. And it's okay. It's when we pay attention to these things and we learn as we go that we become okay. And when we develop a sense of ourself that can love ourselves and be nurtured by our own confidence and self-esteem, that's when we have the potential to become our own highest potential, our own oak tree. Thank you for tuning in, and what comes next is some Q&A.